Welcome to Wellness Made Easy with Wendy and Kirsten. Hi, I'm Wendy. After I graduated with my master's in wellness management, I started my own company, T2 Coaching, Health, Fitness, and Sport. And I'm Kirsten, an athlete, vegan, life coach, and girl mom, running a business focused on helping others create a life they love. We are here to explore all things wellness to help you become the person you've always wanted to be. So if that's why you're here, open your ears and your mind as we tackle the world of wellness together. Hey, everybody. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Kirsten. How are you?
Good. We are on a little bit of a time crunch today, so we are just going to jump right in with your wellness win.
My wellness win was I successfully completed all the things I wanted to complete during my birth month, which was, kind of a challenge. The two things that I wanted to do was to be able to run 5.2 miles at least every day, and within the week complete 5,200 feet of elevation gain for 4 weeks. And on top of that, I realized after week 3 that I was doing 52-ish miles a week. So I'm like, all right, let's go with it. And let's make sure, it was probably at 2.5 weeks. I realized that. I'm like, let's set that third bonus goal of trying to do 52 miles a week for 4 weeks. And the struggle was when I was at my mom's house, she had surgery. So I was taking care of her for a few days, and I had a weekend swim meet. And so it was just kind of the uncertainty of would I be able to accomplish that fourth week? And I did. So again, setting a goal and accomplishing it is always definitely a wellness win in my book.
Yeah, and it's a fun one too.
Yeah.
52, 52, 52, 52
Yeah.
to celebrate you.
Exactly.
Woo, woo. My wellness one was also running, because I have not been running very much over the past few months. And this past weekend, I did a 5K on Saturday. I've been doing a 5K every month. And I wasn't really sure, because I just started kind of training a little more intensely. So I didn't know how the 5K would turn out. But it was actually faster than last month. So that is way a wellness win. And it's more around the pace that I want to be going for my 5Ks. So now I just need to start feeling a little less effort at that pace because it's still newer. And then the next day I ran a half marathon. It was my first half marathon since September, which was 6 months ago. So it was as anticipated. It was a little bit rough. It was a chilly, windy day. But the course was up this big switchback. It's all on a bike path, but it's up this big switchback and then down this big switchback, which is really challenging. But I've pushed Cora in the stroller during this race 8 times, I think, over the last 6 years. So I kept thinking to myself as I was going up this really hard hill, I'm like, I've pushed a child in a stroller. And even I think when Cora was 30 pounds, 35 pounds, it was one of the last half marathons we did. So I'm like, if I can push a kid up this hill, I can run up the hill. And my main goal was to not blow up, to be pretty consistent. Every single mile was 8 something. So my slowest mile up the hill was 8:59. And then my fastest mile, I think, was 8:03. They were all 8 something, which to me is consistent for over 13 miles. So I was very, very pleased with it. I was really sore because I was not trained for it. But wellness win, because I did 2 back-to-back races. I survived it, and I'm moving on with my training.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. So today we wanted to talk to, this is mostly for the athletes out there. So if you are a non-athlete, this could pertain to other areas of your life, because we're going to talk about pre, during, and post big event and what emotions go on. And this could also pertain to a wedding or a move or a divorce or a job transfer or, any big thing that's happening in your life. These kind of feelings and emotions can transfer into those areas. So if you're like, oh, I'm not an athlete, I'm turning this off, maybe just listen for a few minutes and see what you think, because I feel like, part of what Wendy and I, even though we're both athletes, we use all our knowledge and experience that we've taken from being an athlete, and we use it in all the areas of our lives to be successful. And one of the reasons we wanted to talk about these emotions, especially that go on pre, during, and post race, or a big endurance event or a big event in your life, is because we want to normalize it. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. When Wendy and I first started doing longer distances, like the Ironman distance or half Ironman distance, neither one of us knew anybody else who was doing these distances. So we didn't have anyone to really talk to. And there wasn't social media. There wasn't Facebook groups. Not many even books came out yet about people's experiences in these races back then. So we had to kind of struggle through it alone, and we want to normalize these feelings and share with you guys and let you guys know that these are real things, that real feelings and emotions that happen pre, during, and post race that are okay to feel. And so we kind of wanted to talk about that. So let's kind of just go in order just to keep it organized. Let's talk about taper. So Wendy, what is a taper and why is it important?
Well, I think for me, the big thing as a coach and athlete is a taper before a big main event is different than just resting before a main event. A taper involves resting, but it's more than that. It's actually a gradual reduction of training volume over the course of up to 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever distance you're preparing for, whether it's just like a single sport event or a multi-sport event, and it's planned. It's not just Wednesday, oh, I'm going to jump into this half marathon on Saturday. I'm going to rest a few days. That's not a taper. That's a spontaneous, I do want to give myself a little bit of lower training load so I feel a little bit fresher for a race in 3 days. And so when I think of a taper, I'm thinking for a bigger event, half marathon, marathon, half Ironman, where the coach or the athlete, if you're self-trained, is doing a certain volume training load peak before, like, let's say 2 to 3 weeks before they start to reduce that load. And it's planned. It's not random. It's very structured based on how much duration and intensity you do during the taper. And I think the number one benefit and how you structure your taper, all it depends on how long you've been training leading up to that race and how much your training load is during that race specific build phase before the taper. So that peak before your taper is really important. That's why everyone's different. It's important that you just don't follow someone else's taper plan, especially if you didn't follow someone else's race specific build phase of training.
Right. Yeah. I've actually, like, I'm sure you have too. You've had athletes and they like have done like half what they're supposed to be doing. They haven't even done any big workouts and they're like, oh, I'm going to start my taper. And you're like, what are you tapering from?
Right.
Like you said, you have to have put on some sort of consistent training load to taper from.
Right. And the benefit of it is so you can arrive at your race fresh, and you can arrive at your race fresh, not fatigued. And so you're reducing that training load, giving your muscles a break, and the theoretical plan, your chances are higher arriving to race day fresh and not fatigued. Fresh, fit, and not fatigued. I express the importance of you're still going to be fit because that's what a lot of athletes may struggle with. They think they might be losing fitness during this taper.
Right. So we could go on and talk about like how to taper, like that's like Wendy said, it's going to be different for everyone. Get with your coach or work with somebody who has experience with helping you build a taper. What we want to talk about today is what a taper feels like, the emotions you go through, some of the things that both of us do's and don'ts maybe that we've from our own experiences that will help you guys get through your first or your 50th taper. So Wendy, what are some of the things you personally have experienced and learned from tapering for your big races?
Well, first thing I want to say is it's not linear. It doesn't always happen. I've had tapers, especially in the beginning when I was more of a beginner athlete, where I would be exhausted. I'd have phantom pains, phantom injuries, and I call them phantom because they would just be all of a sudden these aches. Oh my gosh, my ankle hurts. Or is my tendonitis that I had in the past, is that flaring up? Or you pull a calf muscle or something happens during that taper
It was so stressful.
that I like to call phantom pains, because that creates a lot of mental anxiety when you're like, oh my God, I just trained for 6 months to a year, whatever, and now I'm hurt. And when you're reducing training volume, especially in the beginning, your body, your hormones and everything going on is adjusting to the change in the stress load that you're providing it. So again, in the beginning, I used to have these phantom pains or exhaustion. And an athlete that I recently coached for a marathon, she did the marathon in the middle of January, this is the first time I was coaching her, was experiencing the same thing. And it's all about trust the process, trust the taper. Um, if you continue to eat well and sleep well, the only thing that's really changed in your life is the reduction of training volume. I mean, there's a lot of things that can impact your taper, just the stress of life. And then like maybe 3 or 4 days before the race, she's like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I feel awesome. You were right. It worked. And she had a very successful, she PR'd by like 15 or so minutes in the marathon. And so over the years, I mean, I'm in year 33 of doing triathlon. I don't experience the exhaustion. And I think it's because I have the timing down right. I have the
Right.
timing down of how long I want to taper before a triathlon, and I have the timing down right for how long I want to taper before like an ultra, 30, 50K, 50 miler. And so, there's just dialing that in. I look forward to it. I get excited for my taper because I know I've quote unquote earned it by the training load that I've done and completed before the taper. I know I'm ready and I enjoy it now. Whereas
Yeah.
I used to, and I'm like every other beginner athlete, I used to not and rest enough. I remember, I qualified for my first Ironman in 1997, and then of course every year after that I wanted to qualify again, and I didn't until Kona. My second Kona was 2003, is because I'd go into these qualifying races exhausted because I didn't have a coach. There really wasn't any information, no social media. I mean, guys, can you imagine no social media when we started? How did we figure this stuff out? We figured it out by trial and error and just
Yeah.
doing it. Maybe some books, were out. And so once I learned the importance of a taper and the rest and the rejuvenation and the fueling, everything changed. I started winning
Right.
races. I started qualifying more frequently. I started doing more Ironmans. I started getting injured less. And so definitely was a game changer.
Right. I had a similar experience with just experimenting with the taper because my first Ironman, I followed a book called 13 Weeks to a Sub 13 Ironman. And I just followed the training plan, and it was 3-week build, 1 week recover. It was a 3-week taper. But again, like Wendy, I didn't have anybody I know that had ever done an Ironman. I didn't really have any resources or anyone to talk to. And I thought that since on the recovery week and the taper was less volume, it gave me a chance to catch up on all my training I missed. And it's funny because we can laugh about it now, but both of us have beginner athletes that I just had a guy like 2 weeks ago. I go, "How's your week going?" He goes, "I'm still trying to catch up on last week's training." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the worst coach ever. I forgot to tell you, don't do that." So, but I did that. And so I went into the race exhausted and came out of the race exhausted. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it was interesting because I didn't really believe in the taper because I still did okay in my first race. I still finished. That was my goal. And the next few years, I did kind of a taper, like Wendy had said at the beginning, like not structured, not planned, just take a few days off before. And I did okay in my races. And then one year, I think it was about 5 or 6 years after I started triathlon, I got a really bad ear infection 2 weeks before a sprint. and it was so bad that I couldn't even run. So like the impact of running hurt my ear so bad. So I couldn't swim. I couldn't bike because just the wind of biking hurt my ear. And I couldn't swim, bike, or run for like 2 weeks. And I'm like, I'm going to go into this race and like be horrible because I haven't worked out in 2 weeks. It was literally 2 full weeks. And I went in and won my age group at the Danskin, which normally I would get like 10th or so, which I thought was great because Danskin was this huge all women's race. And my age group back then was in the 30s and it was super competitive. And all of a sudden I won my age group and on a sprint, I cut off like 4 minutes.
That just reminded me. I think the final straw for me was that forced rest that you talked about.
Yeah.
Getting that phantom pain, that injury, or getting sick, something happening that you couldn't control that forced you to take more time off during the taper. And that realization, because, you either logged it or you just mentally took note of what happened previous years. How is that different than now? It's like, well, oh yeah, I had to take 2 weeks off. I've never done that before. Look what the result was like.
Yeah. And so that I was sold. After that, I'm like, oh, I guess and this was even after Wendy and I got our USAT coaching certification. I forgot what year, maybe 2002.
Yeah, I was thinking 2003.
Yeah, this was after that. So I'd even learned like how to write out a training plan with a taper for other people, but I was still a little hesitant, like it doesn't apply to me. And I crushed the race. I did so well and I felt so good. And I recovered really well after, which was a huge difference than most of my races. So I was like, okay, I guess this taper thing works.
Yeah.
So I was pretty sold after that. So one of the things I wanted to add about the taper that's a little bit different than Wendy's, in case, she said we're all going to have different experiences. I actually feel kind of crappy up until race day. Like I feel lethargic and I feel because my mental health relies a lot on doing a lot of workouts, but I really care about my racing. So I do a really great taper, which means I'm not sitting on the bike for 2 hours or doing like on the elliptical for an hour just to clear my mind. And I take out all those kind of what people call junk miles because I get a little more specific to sharpen up everything to get ready for my race. And so I actually mentally feel really awful, but it always turned, and I'm like, even the day before the race, I'm doing like a shakeout run and it's like 11-minute pace. And I'm like, I'm never going to win a race at an 11-minute pace. And then suddenly on race day, the clouds part and the sun comes out and my body is super ready for race day.
Mm-hmm. It's such a mental thing.
Yeah.
It's physical, it's mental, it's nutritional. Again, I know we haven't, I'm going to jump into this right now since I mentioned it. It's important to continue to fuel your body during the taper and get rid of the mindset and the preoccupation with food and telling yourself, I can't eat that because my training has reduced. Again, going back to episode 12, when we talked about disordered eating and exercise bulimia, where you work out enough so you can eat. This is all about you want to eat so you can perform to the best of your ability.
Right. To repair all the muscle damage you've done, to get your joints and ligaments strong, to get your, glycogen stores topped off and your brain glucose, like to get just everything in tip top shape. Sleep. That's the other thing. Sleep as much as you can during taper. I used to, especially from an Ironman, when I do a really heavy training, I'd be like, oh, I can't wait till taper. Here's my list of things I'm going to get done around the house. And I know a lot of people do this. They're like, oh, I'm tapering, so I'm going to go on vacation with my family. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And you're still doing so much. You're still not allowing your body to rest. So you have to schedule rest.
And if you are going to go on vacation with your family during a taper, don't go to Disney World or Disneyland because people have been known to put in, 30, 40,000 steps at those amusement parks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I just remembered, I went to Hawaii with a friend, it was right before I did that Arizona 70.3. And I was it was kind of a train through race, but I wanted to taper a little bit. But I was planning on doing a lot more in Hawaii as far as training. But I got a little bit done. But I was there. My daughter, I think, was 3. I was there with my mom. I was there with my friend and his family. And I was like, same thing. And I didn't sleep very well because Hawaii is like way different time zone. And I got to Arizona. I flew straight from Hawaii to Arizona, and I got to Arizona and I was pretty exhausted, but I ended up crushing the race because my taper was more than I was planning, because it was a half taper, half train through race. But since I tapered more than I thought I was going to do, I actually did really, really well. So yes, you go on vacation, spend time with family, just don't do anything that's super strenuous on your vacation with your taper.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and just know that, like Wendy said, emotions are all over the place. You're second guessing everything. If your last long run was 18 miles, and then the week before the race you ran 3 miles, and you're like, I don't know how I'm ever going to run a marathon. You have to trust that this is the way it works, and a marathon will come out of you.
Right. And I always tell, especially first time athletes, whether they're completing a 5K, 10K, marathon, Ironman, whatever, if you've never finished one of those events before, you will always doubt your ability to finish, and you won't know how prepared or unprepared you were until you cross the finish line. You could be a little bit underprepared and still cross the finish line.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's each race, it should be a learning experience. I always encourage athletes to do post-race reviews. Definitely keep a training log, so something you can look back on. I look on athletes that I continue to coach year after year. I look at their post-race reviews for the following year, even if it's not the same race, if it's a 70.3, okay, what did they say about their 70.3 last year? So we can look back at that and see if there was anything that they wanted to focus on, or if they had any struggles or issues like change dropping, flat tire, stuff like that, so we can prepare them better for their next 70.3.
Yeah. Yeah. Training logs and journaling. We talked about that when we talked about periodization, and we've talked about it like 5 times. So yeah, keeping track so you can look back, because you're not going to remember, especially what you did before a race. Once you do the race, after the race, you don't remember what you did before the race. All you remember is like, I did the race. This is what happened during the race.
Yeah.
The pre-race kind of disappears in your mind. So journaling it, training log, talking to your coach about it, so that they can come back and say, remember you said this, remember you said that,
Yep.
or remember you did this. So taper, if you guys have any questions about taper, let us know. We could answer it in our listener question section if you have some specific questions about tapering. I know that was really general, but we wanted to more talk about it's okay to feel all these feelings.
Yeah, and the more experience you get, the more you're going to handle what's going on. Whether you're stressing about eating too much, stressing about not training enough, stressing about a phantom pain, ache, whatever. If you just have life stress, a relationship stress, a job stress, anything, that's just part of life. That's just part of the deal. You can't, there's nothing that's perfect and ideal. It could happen, but chances are less that you're going to have the perfect, pre-race routine going on. It's all learning experience, and it's fun. I mean, again, we've been in the sport for so long. We've had plenty of experiences,
It takes years.
both
It
highs
takes
and lows.
years and years to get your perfect taper plan to go into place, just like years and years to get your perfect race day plan.
Yep.
I mean, I think it took me 12 or 15 years to get my nutrition dialed in, and I'm still kind of like tinkering with things. So Wendy, and again, with race day stuff, we could go into detail about all the logistics, and we could do that on another podcast. And if you guys have some specific questions, we can go over that. But for today, we want to talk about more of the emotional, what to expect, the ups and the downs, how you're going to feel during the race morning, right after the race, just to give you guys an idea of that. A lot is going on in your body and your mind, and it's all okay.
Right. So when I was an age group swimmer, I was competing at age 6 all the way through college. And I never liked competition. I always loved the training, but I would get up on the starting block and be like looking around like, what am I doing here? Like, and I never really reached my potential because I was always a head case. And I realized over the years that I used to compete to please my coach or my parents. I really didn't do it for me per se. I trained for me, but I didn't compete for me. And so I always struggled with the competition side of things. I was always just really nervous, sick to my stomach, everything that most of us will feel, especially when we're new. But I felt that for a long time. And that's another reason I didn't like competition, because I didn't like those pre race nerves of sickness. And so it was finally in 2003. Again, I competed K through college. I had been in this triathlon for 11 years now. I was my second Ironman in Kona, and I had a lot of drama going on with me and my current husband because we split up 2 weeks before I went to Kona. We broke up. And so I had other concerns on my mind. And I remember going into the pier for the warm up or for the start of the race. I wasn't nervous at all, because all I wanted to do was get the race done so I could get home and try to save my relationship, which I did, by the way, because we've been married for 20 years. So,
Congrats.
um, anyways, I wasn't nervous. And I'm like, oh, wow, I just did a race that I completely enjoyed from start to finish with no nerves, no expectations, not really any goal. I mean, I had a goal like 11 hours. I ended up finishing in 11:13, so I was pretty close. But I savored that moment. And that was the moment that I said, you love to train, you hate to race. Treat every race as another day of training. And from there on forward, we're now 22 years later since that day. I started appreciating races more because they're just another day of training to me, which I love to do. It's just with, the aid stations and a lot more athletes. It's a big group training day to test out the last 12 weeks of how I prepared. It's to test out my preparation. It's nothing more than that to me now. And so that was my like wake up call, is once I don't have those pre-race nerves, I get excited. And the excited nerves is different than that sickness where you can't eat or drink and you don't know what you're doing there.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because when I see you at a race, and just when I feel like you're the most like chill person ever at a race.
I am
So like,
now.
I know, but like you would show up to a race like right before it started. There's the people who get to the race. If transition opens at 5, there's people that get to the parking lot at 4:30.
Uh-huh.
And there's people that get to, and the transition closes at 7. There's people that get to the transition at 6:30.
Yep.
And I feel like you're always, so when you kind of like strolled in, just set up, you're like, whatever. And then you go out and win the race. And I've talked to people about that, about you, about like that personality and that style of just feeling like you seem like you don't care about the race, because you're like, whatever it is, what it is. And then you go out and like break records.
And that is definitely a confident, I have the confidence now. I think back as a swimmer, as an age group swimmer, I lacked confidence, even though I'd crush it in training. I mean, if I told you sets that I did in training, no one believes me. My kids that I coach don't believe me when I tell them the sets I used to do in training. But for some reason, that didn't translate to confidence in the competition part of it. Don't know why. But, again, I have this years of experience, and I have this confidence and the experience. I know based on training what I'm capable of doing. And that to me is enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to race to prove to myself or anyone else what I'm capable of. I like to do certain things of training that build that confidence for me to say, okay, I want to move on to the next event to prepare for. I don't really want to actually do the event. And then I go into it's just because I like to train. So again, it's total mindset shift of what it means to you.
Right. And you mentioned, going into the race knowing what you're capable of. I think that's really huge. If you're following a race plan and you're hitting your milestones and you're hitting your goals along the way and you're recovering properly and doing everything, you go into your race knowing exactly, if all goes well. There could be weird things, like one race I had 2 flat tires right in a row, and one race I panicked in the swim and we talked about that in the anxiety one, and I hung on to a paddle board for 6 minutes. But in general, if you don't have any weird outside things like that, or the weather isn't crazy, or you should know going into a race exactly what you're capable of and exactly how the race is going to turn out for you.
And on the opposite, if you know, I've had races where I've been injured for 8 weeks and I haven't been able to run, and if you know training, you've had setbacks and obstacles to overcome in training, and what you were capable of, what you thought was going to happen 6 months ago you're not quite there, and you need more time to get there, then you just you just have to adjust your
Yeah.
expectations. If you've never swam a minute 30 for a 100-meter swim, don't expect to hold a minute 30 for 2.4 miles.
Right.
Like, it's just a matter of a mindset adjustment and being okay with, wow, I know I can't run a 10K in 45 minutes this year because I haven't been able to run that pace in training. Just adjust
Right.
your goals. And again, being in the sport for 33 years, it's the longevity. I have that longevity because I'm able to make those modifications and adjustments because I love the sport so much that I'm not going to let a certain, adaptation and a lower expectation take me away from doing the sport I enjoy. It's not a judgment against me. It's just due to the preparation was dealt with.
Right. Yeah, I was supposed to pace. My friend he's a race director, and he has half marathon next month. And 2 years ago, I paced an hour 40 group. So that's 8 minute pace. So I paced the hour 40 group, hour 45. Sorry, I paced the hour 45 group. It's exactly 8 minute mile. Nailed it. Went over the finish line exactly 1:45. So this year he's like, "Oh, do you want to pace that 1:45 group again?" I'm like, I'm not really sure like where I'm at." And he was like, "Oh, you'll get there." But then I've done a couple 5Ks where I could barely make an 8 minute mile on my 5Ks. And this is 4 weeks away. So I sent him an email. It was before I even did the half marathon on Sunday, which was confirmation that I did the right thing. And I said, "There's no way I'm going to be able to pace an 8 minute mile for a half marathon with where I am right now." And he was like, "Oh no, you still have a month." And I'm like, "No, I know my body, and that I'm not going to be able to pace that." So I bailed out of pacing.
I've always told myself, like, even if I knew I was capable of a 1:45 half marathon, I wouldn't want to be responsible just in case I was just having a bad
Yeah,
day.
it was,
Because I know from experience, you're not always capable of what you
yeah,
think you should be, and to be responsible for people pacing them. So if I ever paced like a half marathon or a full marathon, I would pace a 2.5 hour half marathon group.
yeah. It was my most nervous I've ever been for a half marathon because I'd never paced before. The good news was I had another girl pacing with me.
Mm-hmm.
So there was two of us, which was good because she was out drinking the night before, and she showed up and she's like, "Oh my God, I feel like crap. I haven't been able to eat breakfast. I have a headache. My stomach hurts." And she actually at mile 10, she's like, "You just go on without me." So luckily I was feeling decent and I
Yeah.
could finish it.
See,
But yeah, it was so nerve wracking pacing it for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to mention for race morning, because this is what I used to do, and it doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve anybody. I would show up at the race and look at everybody's $10,000 bikes and look at everybody's super fit, skinny bodies, look at everyone's muscles and their fancy shoes and their amazing calves. And before the race even started, I would be like, "There's no way I'm going to do well in this race." I would look around at everybody else and see all these super athletes. And I don't do this anymore because I've learned with experience that just because somebody looks a certain way, or somebody has a $20,000 bike, or somebody has $600 shoes, it does, or they're part of some branded team that has really sweet looking outfit, does not necessarily mean they're fast. But I think it took me 20 years to not judge myself against, not compare myself to everyone else that looked like they were in my age group, that looked like they could kick my ass, and literally get to the start feeling like there's no way. And I always knew I could finish a race, but I always have goals of doing really well in my age group. And so I would just sit there and like lose the race in my head before the race even started. So I want to caution you against comparison, because it does no good for anyone. It's typically not even a real thing. Like what you think is, like Wendy and I have talked about with, like even in our eating disorder episode and a couple other episodes, like there are people with body types that you wouldn't look at and be like, oh, they're going to be super fast or super, like I've seen really like fit looking, like Olympian looking people that like can barely swim.
Right. And I run, especially just running races, behind runners who I'm criticizing their form. I'm not criticizing it, but I'm doing a run form analysis on them and they're crushing me. And I'm like, I'm thinking something, how can I let that run form beat me? But then I'm like, well, probably because they're specifically a runner and you're a multi-sport athlete. There's a big difference between multi-sport athlete running a 10K than an actual serious 10K runner who that's all they do is train for 10Ks.
Right.
That happened to me at my last 10K. And I also just wanted to say, like in 1997, my first Ironman, I went there like 7 days before the race. I was a graduate teaching assistant and I had a student who let me stay at her parents' house because her parents were going to be away. So I got there early. I didn't know. I mean, I went alone. Like this is my first Ironman, 1997. Like I didn't know anything about anything. And I had my bike in a hard case bike box, all broken up into pieces in a case. No clue. I get off the plane. There's a, couple hundred bike cases coming off the carousel at the airport. I guess I was on a flight with the German team. Talk about intimidation. And then the first time I went to one of those practice swims, same thing, the body types, the body images, stuff like that, just really went to my head. Like, what am I doing here? And now you're like, well, you deserve to be here. You qualified. That's what you're doing here. You actually qualified, but it's definitely a different thing. Thin bodies who are runners usually can't swim.
Right.
And so here I am, a swimmer, crushing them all. And so that
Right.
made me more confident and that made me feel better. But definitely don't judge someone by what they look like. Not at all. That's something I've learned over the years.
Yeah. You guys just don't go through it for 20 years like Wendy and I did. It's like, just trust us. When my first experience in Kona was so hard, like my race report, if you listen to my race video from 2014, I was crying. I swore I would never do it again. I had a really bad experience because of myself, because of my head. So I got to Hawaii 2 weeks early before the race because my husband and I had always wanted to go to Hawaii. And I thought it would be the only time I would ever going to be in Hawaii. So I was like, let's go for the whole month. So him and I went for the whole month of October. And so we got there 2 weeks early and then we stayed 2 weeks after the race. Getting to Hawaii 2 weeks early, the only people in Kona 2 weeks before the race are professional athletes. So me feeling like I didn't really, even though again, I qualified for the race, I felt like I qualified like by default because the race I qualified in, it was like a 50% DNF in my age group. And so I ended up finishing and getting third and getting a spot. But in my mind, I only got the spot because so many people dropped out. And so I went in not feeling like I deserved to be there anyway, like Wendy said.
Those people that dropped out didn't beat you. They drop out.
I know, but like something in my head was like, you don't deserve to be here. So I get there and all that's running up, and we were staying right on Alihi Drive, and all day, all morning, all afternoon is professional athletes biking and running up and down Alihi. And I was like, what the, like, I barely earned this spot. I don't deserve to be here. So I showed up, and that was 2 weeks worth of getting in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And like a few days before the race, like real people started showing up, but I already had in my head that I didn't deserve to be there. And so I got there race morning. It was so windy. It was so hard. I worked really hard to get there, and I did not enjoy a single second of the race because I was so in my head with me not deserving to be there. And so after the race, I was like, oh my gosh, I would never do this again. This is like miserable. Why would I do this to myself? Like, I left feeling like not a real athlete. I was 85th place out of 80. I think there was 89 people in my age group. I was 85th out of 89. And I'm like, I'm not even like an athlete. Like, this sucks.
Wow.
So I should go back and find my race report. I remember crying, and I remember saying I would never, ever, ever, ever do this again. So that was 2014. So a few years went by. I actually started enjoying training, like we always talk about, enjoying. And I was like, you know what? I want to qualify again to prove to myself that I deserve to be there. And I worked my ass off for 2 years, ended up winning my age group in Boulder, qualified again, went back in 2017, it's not even close to the same experience. I felt like I deserved to be there. I felt like I was an athlete. Like, I was there doing the world championship because I repeated it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had to do that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it made my whole first experience. And if that would have been my only experience in Hawaii, I would have been so sad that working 10 years to qualify, and I ended up having this like horrible experience all because of me. It
Right.
had nothing to do with anybody else. Wendy was there. You were there. You did the race. You qualified.
That was a good year.
You qualified at the last minute because you're like, oh, you qualified? I guess I will. So Wendy jumps in a race and qualifies.
No, that was motivation. I wanted to qualify that year because my first year was 1997. So I really wanted to go for my 20-year anniversary.
Yeah.
And my first attempt was Cozumel. Cozumel is in November. So when I moved to Georgia in 2016, I jumped in to do Cozumel at the end of 2016 to try to qualify for 2017, and I didn't. So I was just kind of like, oh, whatever. And then you had qualified. So I'm like, okay, well, now my motivation to qualify is there again.
Yeah. And then I was so satisfied with my race. I was like, I don't need to go back. But then once I had my child, I was like, you know what? I want to go back and take her to experience it. And had an even better experience. So it just gets better when you get rid of the crap in your head telling you that you're not worthy.
Yeah.
Blow that out of the water. All right, let's move on because we only have a few minutes left. Post race. And this is the most, to me, like the part we want to talk about emotionally, because this is the part that is, it's the letdown after the big event. It's the, I don't have any purpose. I don't have any structure, a lot of depression, a lot of things that people don't know this is normal. And so they're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get my shit together? I feel like is kind of the feeling that a lot of people have 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks after their big event.
Right. So my experience again, after my first one, 1997, I came back, best shape of my life. I'm 24 years old, and all my friends were cyclists. So they're just starting their training to be on the CSU cycling team. And so I thought, oh, I want to be on the CSU cycling team. I need to start training with them. So I didn't take a break. And I ended up, by mid-December, chronic fatigue. My resting heart rate would go from like 70 to 140 just standing up.
Oh my
So
gosh.
my muscles were never recovered. I was always sore. I forced myself to ride my bike with my friends. I ate desserts and pastries. I put on a lot of weight. And I was in grad school for exercise and sports science. So my education was there. I mean, again, I still didn't know a lot. This is 1997. And I think I had exactly 6 months off, put on about 20 pounds. 6 months off, 20 pounds later, I'm like, I got to figure this stuff out. Once I started feeling better, I started diving into recovery and nutrition and fueling. And I ended up doing a comeback race in Muncie, Indiana. I think it was the Muncie, Indiana one. I met my parents. They were still living in Michigan. And I did fairly well, but I had to really like come up. That's the first time I ever came up with a why. I know it was still early on. I was in the sport for 5 years, but the why for me was I don't want that to ever happen to me again. It was such a depressing time in my life to have this chronic fatigue and just sore muscles and exhaustion for 6 months, that the why was became so critical of why do I want to do this, because my post Ironman was horrendous. And so the why of enjoy the sport, enjoy the fitness, a lot of things. I don't remember the exact why back then, but still, um, a learning lesson that the why to become a coach was because that happened to me. And
Right.
I had to learn and figure it out. And I one reason I became a coach is I could share all my experiences with athletes. So they don't have to figure it out on their own. They can learn from my experience and my education and the continuing education over the last 30 years. And so the importance of having a plan in place after your
Mhm.
last race of the season or your most important race of the season is critical. And that can mean time off. That can mean I'm going to take a month off. I'm going to take a week off. Whatever you're going to do, take a week off, take 2 weeks off, take time off until you feel motivated again, and then get back into fun activities. Again, for me, it's the off season, it's the fall season, winter, where instead of going for a run, you go for a hike and you just kind of move your body, and you training isn't training, it's more of you're working out. And then that's that postseason importance of postseason type of training is unstructured. And then you allow yourself the holidays to be very unstructured, because that could be more hectic with travel and family. And then come, let's just say January 1st or
Mhm.
whenever is going to be the start of your next season. And so you can look forward to that because you already have that plan in place. It's not random, it's not guesswork. That's what you have planned. And that's one of my strengths as a coach, is I help athletes through that transition period between their last race of the season and their next season.
Yeah. That's huge, you guys. Planning for after race, because we work on our meal plan, we work on our training plan, we work on our taper plan, we work on our race plan, execute our race plan, and then you're just like, oh, I didn't plan for this, and then you're out in la la land, like freaking out and gaining 20 pounds and feeling awful. So I love plan for your after. And Wendy, I'm the same as Wendy. Since I've been doing it so long, um I don't know if I purposefully said, okay, from here on out this is what I'm going to do, but I think it's evolved into so I love swimming, and swimming is my meditation, swimming is my happy place. I'm not out there doing 1,000 freestyle. I'm throwing on some fins and paddles and a buoy and doing some side stroke and stretching out my body and just being in the water. But as soon as I finish a hard race or finish my season, I instantly just get in the water as much as I can, 3-4 times a week. And that always leads into to my Diswimber, where I have a fun goal of swimming 100,000 meters in December. And that's not like, oh, I'm going to challenge myself for this goal. This is, I don't bike and I don't run because I love swimming. I enjoy swimming. I don't love biking. I don't love running. I do once I get going, but it gives me, it's like an instant break from the pounding of running, of the biking gives my legs a whole month off basically, because I don't really kick that much when I swim. And so I'm enjoying myself. I'm loving it. I do that all through December. So when January comes, I'm not in very good running and biking shape, but it doesn't matter. I just gave my body a great big break. I gave my mind a great big break. I didn't do very much structure. I just got in the pool, did as much as I had time for, put it on a spreadsheet so I could keep track because that's fun. And then it gave me something to get my mind off of, I don't have anything going on right now.
Yep. That's
So
important.
definitely make a plan. The one thing I want to add is let yourself feel whatever you feel.
Mm-hmm.
If you finish a race and you're like, that was fun, I'm going to start planning the next one, la, 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 that's fine. But I think more people than not have that letdown time and have that post-race depression. And that's okay. And feel it as long as you feel it. And if it takes you 3 months till you get on a bike again, great.
Right. And I think you may not have that post-race depression right away. You may be on a high because
Oh,
you're
yeah,
new.
yeah,
You don't have the experience like we've had. You're new. It's your first one. And for I think the longer races, it's more important not to jump into anything too much too soon. So one recommendation I always give athletes is don't sign up for your next Ironman for 2 to 4 weeks. If you can wait 4 weeks, don't sign up for your next Ironman right away.
yeah.
You don't need to. They don't really fill up. There's so many Ironmans out. No, none of them really fill up right away like they used to. Some races would
Right.
fill up the next day. So don't go signing up for a big event right away. And don't be surprised if you're on a high and then 2 weeks later you're still exhausted. It's just that residual fatigue going on, that all that training and all that mental and physical stress of the taper and race day and the post training impact of the hormones and the psyche and everything, that's normal. Just let it
Yes.
happen. And that's when, if you have a plan and you start to have these emotions of feeling lethargic and still tired and sad, that's normal, but you have a plan, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Continue on with your plan because you know it's going to go away.
Yeah. And focus on some things that you love and enjoy. Like Wendy said, hiking. She likes to go hiking in the winter. I like to go swimming in the winter. Spend more time with your family, spend more time with your dogs, clean your house, like all the things you didn't do while you were training. They do help get your mind off of it, but don't just do them to get your mind off it. If you're feeling feelings, just feel them.
Yeah, you can't stay fit 350,
No.
how many, 352 days a year?
365 days a year.
365 days a year. I have 52 on my mind. You have to
Yeah.
let your
No, don't
body get
even try.
unfit. You have to let your body to
Don't
get
try.
unfit and you'll build back fitter, faster, stronger.
Somebody once told me, and this is so true. He said, you will never feel as fit as you do the day you do your first Ironman.
Yeah.
It's like you're so prepared, you're so fit, and then every other day after that, you're like, oh, I can't.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, so just and talk to somebody, write down, journal, all the things we always talk about when you're dealing with feelings and emotions. Is talk to another athlete; they understand.
Mm-hmm.
Your family might not understand if they've never done anything like this, but other Ironman athletes or ultra athletes or people who've done things like this, they will understand. So
Yes.
talk to them. Awesome. Did you have a listener question? Do you want to skip your
I
listener
do have a
question?
couple listener questions, but I want to skip them because I have to get
Okay.
going.
Okay. Let's skip. We'll save them for next week. What are you most excited about for the week?
I'm going to Savannah with my sister Heidi. Savannah,
Oh,
Georgia is about 4-hour drive. I'm not really looking forward to the drive, but she's been really wanting me to go. I've never been there, so it's kind of beachy. Hopefully, it's a little bit warm. I don't want it to drop below 60, but it might. It's been around 40s here at night, but it's been hotter during the afternoon. We get close to 80 now, but it still
right.
dips to the 40s. So we're going to be camping on Friday and Saturday night. So it'll be fun because I'm a big sunset and sunrise person. And I remember when she was there last year, seeing her sunrise and sunset photos. So I'm really excited to get those type of photos.
Oh, that's exciting to be excited to get photos. I don't even know what I'm excited for the upcoming week. I didn't think about anything, and I don't really have anything like major coming up.
Hmm.
So I guess I'm excited. This weekend, my daughter's having a sleepover
Oh,
at her
nice.
friend's house. And she lives in the same apartments as
Yeah.
we do. So in case there's an emergency. But it'll be fun to see her have an exciting sleepover. And other than that, I just have a regular train a little, clean a little, work a little, organize my life a little weekend.
A little structure. Similar
I'm a
structure.
little bit I forgot. I am excited. I always get excited for a new month, and we have a new month coming up. So I am excited for the new month. I'll be honest about
Awesome.
that. All right. Well, you guys, let us know if you have any questions or you want us to go into any more depth into any of this taper stuff, race day stuff, or post race stuff, because we could probably talk for 5 more hours on it, but we are in a little time crunch. So we are going to head out, and we will see you guys next week. Make it a great
day.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye, Wendy.
Thank you for listening to Wellness Made Easy with Wendy and Kirsten.
If you want to learn more about us or anything we talked about today, check out the links in our show notes.
We would love to know what you think of our podcast and what you want more of. So drop us a comment, send us a message, and help us out by leaving us a rating and a review.
And don't forget to let us know your wellness win for this week.
Thanks for listening.
Make it a great day.